Today's topic is direct objects in German, which means that you will learn about the accusative case. But first, let's review what you already know about how German sentences work. First of all, remember that the verbs are states of being or actions in a sentence. For our purposes here, they are also the key to the entire sentence, as you'll soon see. Subjects are the nouns, the people, places, or things that perform the action of the verb. In other words, the subjects are the doers. If you look at a sentence, you can figure out what the subject of the sentence is by asking yourself, who or what verbs? Direct objects are also nouns, but they're not the nouns doing the verbing. Instead, they receive the action of the verb. They are the nouns being verbed by the subject. So for instance, in a sentence like, she plays golf, the subject is she because that's the noun doing the playing. Golf is the direct object, the noun being played by the subject. Let's take a look at a couple of German examples. Each of these sentences has a subject and a direct object. First, find the verb in the sentence. Then figure out who or what is doing that action. That'll be the subject. Then figure out who or what is being verbed by the subject. That's the direct object. We'll circle the sentences and put a box around the direct objects. If you'd like a challenge, pause the video now and see if you can figure these out on your own. Okay, let's check your answers. In the first sentence, ich spiele Tennis, we know that the verb is spiele, so we ask ourselves who is playing, and the answer is ich, that's the subject. Now we ask, what is being played? Tennis is the direct object of that sentence. In the sentence, im Sommer schauen wir Fernsehen, an English speaker might actually assume that im Sommer must be the subject because it comes first. But as you well know, things other than the subject are allowed to come first in German, so we'll have to look more carefully than that. First, we find the verb, schauen, and then ask, who is watching? Wir is the subject. What is being watched? Fernsehen. That's the direct object. In the next sentence, ich is the subject, because that's the noun doing the wanting. Ein Glas Tee is the direct object. That's the object being wanted by the subject. In the question, spielst du gern Basketball? The same process applies even though it's a question instead of a statement. We find the verb, in this case spielst, and ask who is doing the playing. Du is our subject. Now we ask what is being played. So Basketball is the direct object. Finally, in Wie findest du Deutsch, we ask ourselves who is doing the finding. Du is the subject, and so now we ask what is being found. Since Deutsch is being found, it is the direct object of the sentence. As a side note, you may notice that the verb endings give you a big hint about what the subject of the sentence is. Besides going next to the verb, you can look at those endings. When you see a verb ending in E, you know that the subject must be ich. When you see a verb ending in ST, you know the subject is du. Now, let's talk about how to actually use direct objects in German. It can get a little tricky because, as you know, all German nouns have a gender that you have to account for when you use them. German nouns are also used with different cases. A case is the grammatical term for the system that tells you what the noun's function is in a phrase, whether it's the subject or direct object, for instance. So when you use a German noun, you'll have to account for both its gender, which never changes, and its case, which can change from phrase to phrase depending on how you're actually using that noun. The two cases you'll need for now are the nominative and the accusative case. The nominative case is used for subjects, and the accusative case is used for direct objects. You're already pretty familiar with the nominative case because it's used for subjects. When you want to say the with a noun in the nominative case, your options are der for masculine, die for feminine, das for neuter, and die for plural words. For a, the indefinite article, your options are ein for masculine, eine for feminine, and ein for neuter. But there's no word for with plural nouns. You can't have shoes or socks. But if you use the possessive forms, it would be meine, deine, seine, ihre, with an e on the end, etc. The accusative case is used for direct objects. When you want to say the with a noun in the accusative case, your options are den for masculine, die for feminine, das for neuter, and die for plural nouns. For the word a, your options are einen for masculine, eine for feminine, and ein for neuter. There's still no word for with plural nouns, but again, if you used it with a possessive form, it would have an e on it. Meine, deine, seine, ihre, etc. Now, the very good news is that the nominative and accusative cases are identical, except for masculine nouns. Masculine nouns are the only one that will look different when they're direct objects instead of subjects. Der becomes den in the accusative case, and ein becomes einen. So since they're tricky, let's look at some examples of how masculine nouns work in context. First, we'll look at them as subjects. In each of these sentences, because the masculine noun is the subject, it's doing the verbing, you'll notice that we are using der when we mean the, and ein when we mean a. Similarly, when we use a possessive form like mein or dein, that's based on the form of ein that we're using. Now, compare those sentences to some new sentences where the nouns are direct objects, meaning that they are in the accusative case. In each of these sentences, the masculine noun is being used as a direct object. So we use den for the and einen for a. And if we're using a possessive form, then we also base that off of einen. Meinen for my, deinen for your, seinen for his, ihren for her, etc. One of the trickiest things for English speakers to get used to is that the system of cases is more important in German than word order. In English, we know what the subject is and what the direct object is, pretty much based solely on word order. But in German, the subject doesn't always have to come first. You may have a sentence like, den Taschenrechner kauft der Mann. Now, common sense will tell you that calculators don't buy men, it's the other way around. But more important than that, German grammar is also telling you what the sentence actually means. Because it's der Mann, he must be the subject. And because it's den Taschenrechner, that's the direct object, no matter where it goes in the sentence. In other words, to translate this sentence to English, you'll have to reverse the order of the nouns, or it wouldn't make sense. The man buys the calculator. In other words, these two sentences mean the exact same thing, they're just phrased differently. On the other hand, remember that only masculine nouns will tell you whether they are the subject or the direct object. So if you have a sentence with feminine, neuter, or plural nouns, you'll have to use plain old common sense and word order to figure it out. For instance, in a sentence like das Mädchen kauft das T-Shirt, or das T-Shirt kauft das Mädchen, we can assume that those sentences must mean the same thing because common sense tells us that girls buy T-shirts, not the other way around. However, in an example like meine Mutter liebt meine Katze and meine Katze liebt meine Mutter, where it's believable that my mom could love my cat or that my cat could love my mom, then we fall back on word order and assume that the noun in first position is probably the subject. So let's review. Subjects, the nouns that perform the action, will appear in German sentences in the nominative case. Direct objects, the nouns that receive the verb actions, or are verbed by the subjects, if you will be in the accusative case. These cases are identical, except for masculine nouns. Masculine subjects will use the as der and ein as a, but masculine direct objects will use den for the and einen for a.